Accessible pedestrian infrastructure, a missing link in accessible public transport. Thank you for watching this pre-recorded presentation, much appreciated. I am Marianne Jackson, an architect, urban planner and access consultant. My consultancy practice, Visionary Design Development, works at the intersection of the built environment and disability domains. We are based in Australia, in inner Melbourne, Naarm, on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri, Wurrung and Bunurong peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation. As I'm sure you will understand from the presentation title, my interests do not fit within mainstream architecture practice. However, I trust that you will find the following both interesting and informative. Before I start, the video of this presentation is in the form of a headshot of myself, that is, my face and shoulders, speaking at the camera. I am in my mid-60s with collar-length strawberry blonde hair. I always wear glasses. My current glasses are metal framed in a charcoal purple colour. For this presentation, I'm wearing a black shirt with vertical grey stripes over a black t-shirt. While the full paper associated with this presentation includes graphics to illustrate various points, this presentation is intentionally verbal only with captioning. Loosely, the presentation is in 8 parts: background, introduction, literature review, methodology, results, findings, recommendations, including a provocation, and conclusion. Firstly, some general backgrounding. Accessibility advocacy often originates from the disability community rather than the built environment domain, while social impact research highlights the importance of public transport for participation and well-being. Although transport research regularly evaluates individual modes, limited attention is given to how accessibility barriers accumulate at the interfaces between vehicles, infrastructure, and neighbourhood environments. I believe that this problem space demands deeper attention within the built environment domain. I recently completed a PhD on neighbourhood scale built environment accessibility. My doctoral research trialled the Universal Mobility Index UMI process, iterated from the UMI tool. The defining features of the UMI tool are, firstly, that there are 2 components: policy environment and built environment. Secondly, rather than access experts, diverse people with disability provide the built environment components assessment ratings. Lastly, the built environment assessment is undertaken at neighbourhood scale, not building by building. Time limits preclude full explanation of the process. Introduction. In the context of endeavouring to achieve accessible public transport, this presentation highlights how existing complex urban systems with animate and inanimate actants, visible and hidden, affect people with disabilities, social participation and well-being. Public transport is typically thought to be mass transit modes, such as trains, buses and trams, with accessibility concerns often reduced to whether the rolling stock accommodates users. Also, in our era of privatised public service, digital technology and micro-mobility solutions, who and what is involved in achieving accessible public transport is not at all clear-cut. Due to the historically discriminatory nature of legacy systems of conventional public transport, privately owned vehicles are also widely used. Therefore, private cars and vans also function as a form of public transport, particularly when, for example, they are driven by carers. Road-based personal transport modes depend on accessible parking and seamless connections to pedestrian infrastructure at destinations. For many diverse people with disability, taxis and rideshare also function as essential transport. Rather than users turning up to designated locations to catch fixed route services, rideshare requires summoning vehicles via mobile devices, thereby relying on multiple hidden subsystems such as accessible software and telecommunications infrastructure. Uber drivers refusing to pick up people with disability travelling with assistance dogs is unfortunately commonplace. At a systems level, this exposes the regulatory differences between licensed taxis, falling under Australia's disability standards for accessible public transport, and rideshare platforms, which are, as yet, not regulated in the same manner. Nonetheless, whether summoned or departing from fixed route stops, many people with disability require continuous, accessible paths of travel to reach pickup points. However, these paths are frequently disrupted by uneven surfaces, protruding infrastructure, and obstructive shared micromobility devices. As such devices are increasingly framed as public transport options, the broader transport ecosystem becomes even more complex. Consequently, creating inclusive, accessible public transport involves addressing multiple interacting, multidimensional subsystems that span across, for example, the built environment and disability domains. Literature review. Within the built environment, practice is typically project-based and risk-adverse, prioritising minimum regulatory compliance over a commitment to the universal design espoused by the UNCRPD. This creates reinforcing cycles. Limited exposure to disability leads to compliance-focused practice, producing inaccessible environments. Prioritising minimum regulatory compliance also sustains power imbalances between professional experts and people with lived experience. In parallel, however, evidence consistently shows that built environment, form, content, and detail shape pedestrian experience. Complex adaptive systems theory suggests accessibility improvement requires attention to both large-scale systems and fine-grained detail. At a city scale, built environment practitioners design interfaces between transport infrastructure and community connectivity. At neighbourhood scale, built environment practitioners design connections between footpaths, boundaries, and buildings, and have oversight over planning, approvals, and construction. In this systemic sense, built environment practitioners shape accessibility outcomes. People with disability rely heavily on continuous, accessible footpath networks to reach transport and local destinations. However, built environment practitioners often lack understanding of this accessibility nexus. Siloed disciplines and reductionist approaches dominate, alongside limited awareness of the concept of disability models, lived experience of people with disability, or ways of designing universally. My research sought to disrupt this cycle through the UMI process, an intervention designed to connect theory and practice and experts and users within a broader theory of change. Methodology. 10 fieldwork sessions were conducted. All locations assessed were within about a 5-minute walk of North Melbourne's Errol Street Activity Centre, that is the local high street, Main Street. Spanning across the boundary between the suburbs of North Melbourne and West Melbourne, the trial area is within the local government authority area of the City of Melbourne, not far from the northwest fringe of the CBD. In each session, at least one built environment participant and one participant with disability traversed a predetermined route. Approximately 22 to 31 randomised locations were rated by the participant with disability using a 5-point Likert scale ranging from very bad to very good. The built environment component is disaggregated into 4 categories. The infrastructure category is further disaggregated into transport, footpaths, road crossings, public spaces, and miscellaneous, the latter being mostly diverse street furniture. Again, time constraints preclude providing fuller details of the site sessions or how ratings convert to scores. Results. The quantitative data painted a stark picture where 0.00 signifies completely inaccessible and 1.00 signifies fully accessible. Transport scored 0.38. Footpaths also scored 0.38. Road crossings were marginally better at 0.44. Such scores provide a clear and compelling metric for change. Qualitative data further illuminated multiple issues with existing conditions, particularly at the interfaces where differing subsystems relating to different actants come together. Two very brief site session vignettes follow. Devan, a pseudonym, a blind ambulant participant, encountered a tram stop. Devan, an experienced Southeast Side tram traveller, firstly explained the usual multi-step process of catching a tram, which includes, for example, checking mobile phone apps for timetabling, and then, at the stop, listening for the tram's arrival. Common in Melbourne, the tram stop is on an intersection where the tram route turns. This increases sound contraindications. The modern glazed shelter is on the footpath, and catching the tram requires moving to the middle of the road. The shelter is a very common design, representative of the subsystem of standardised business-as-usual transport stop solutions. Dan, always up for a challenge, simulated catching the tram by crossing into the roadway. Many detail issues with the road crossings were highlighted, and understandably, Devan's assessment was scathing. Abrianor, also a pseudonym, a manual wheelchair user, assessed a different tram stop on the same route. Firstly, there was neither shelter to wait within on the footpath, nor sufficient safe space to wait in the middle of the road. Secondly, there are no low-floor trams operating on the route, the rolling stock of which is privately owned. And the only level access tram stop, provision of which is a joint state government, local government responsibility, is several blocks away. Abrianor also demonstrated that footpath camber, a local government responsibility, is very problematic for user-propelled manual wheelchairs. As one can't get equal power into the push, getting to transport stops is extremely tiring. Across all sessions, paths of travel were frequently interrupted by multiple obstacles. Uneven footpaths are a local government responsibility. Pit lids, privatised utility entities are responsible for service pit lids. Standardised street furniture installations, a local government responsibility, poorly designed and inconveniently placed. And inaccessible road crossings. The state government is responsible for arterial roads, the local government is responsible for local roads. At signalised road crossings, the positioning of call buttons was often a complete afterthought. Traffic lights at intersections on arterial roads are a state government responsibility. In another session, an otherwise very good footpath could not be accessed from the road crossing in the direction of intended travel, thereby requiring backtracking to access the transport stop. Pedestrian movement was also observed to be subservient to vehicular traffic management, further complicating users' journeys within neighbourhoods. Trying to reach transport points necessarily involves journeys throughout the built environment. In the moment, it is immaterial to users who exactly is responsible for what. Findings. The trial identified that boarding, alighting from transportation vehicles and negotiating pedestrian infrastructure to reach said vehicles are key pain points. In parallel, the UMI process demonstrated that embedding assessment within a theory of change framework that inherently intersects with multiple subsystems shifts practitioner mindsets. In interviews, architect participants revealed the transformative impact of the site sessions. Therefore, to improve neighbourhood scale accessibility, built environment practitioners must interact directly with users in person in real world conditions. Enabling direct, productive interaction between the architecture profession and people with disability requires remoulding tacit professional socialisation in both academia and practice. Recommendations. Innovative and coordinated actions are required to achieve such an outcome. Based on my doctoral studies, I recommend the following. In academia, rather than being offered as an occasional elective, inclusive design courses must be mandated and satisfactory completion compulsory. Such courses must be co-designed and taught with people with disability and included in curriculums at all year levels. Design studios, a staple of architectural education, must be undertaken with diverse people with disability as design partners. In practice, within compulsory CPD programs to maintain professional qualifications, practitioners must complete mandated universal design courses, co-designed and taught with people with disability. My doctoral studies illustrate how applying the UMI process in both academic and practice settings can assist in achieving the above recommendation. As a provocation, I present the following slightly modified extract from my PhD epilogue. By 2030, 4 years hence, more interaction with people with disability and less reliance on technical compliance in architectural practice, achieved by one or more UMI process implementations anywhere in inner middle, insert city of choice. People with disability intertwined in architectural education through enhanced cycles of connection and reflection achieved by one or more design studios using UMI process implementation for backgrounding, designing accessibly, at one or more universities in insert city of choice. Conclusion. Complex adaptive systems thinking reveals that achieving accessible public transport requires paying attention to a broader range of subsystems than the business as usual suspects of rolling stock. Improving built environment accessibility is not a wicked problem, but it is complex. Harnessing complex adaptive systems thinking will achieve more inclusive outcomes. Complex adaptive systems thinking also reveals that attractors are essential. The UMI process trial validated that it is indeed an attractor in enabling direct, productive interaction between the built environment and disability knowledge domains. Thank you for watching and or listening. This presentation's content is further elaborated in the associated paper, which also contains explanatory diagrams with alt text description. Please feel free to make contact. My email address is maj@vdd.com.au. Thank you.